Welcome to another episode of Talking Fast, a Gilmore Girls podcast. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Alexis.
And we're two longtime fans of the show, and we're excited to rewatch and recap it along the way.
Okay, this week we will be discussing Season 1, Episode 15, Christopher Returns. The Netflix bio for this episode is Rory's father returns, causing tension in Emily and Richard's house, and forcing Lorelai to make a big decision about her family's future.
Wow. It's a dramatic episode.
Yes. It really is. And I don't think the bio, sells that enough.
No, not at all.
But the other day, I was thinking about how we struggle to do our Talking Fast segment in 30 seconds. And that made me have new sympathy for, the Netflix bio writers who are, in a way, trying to do the same thing, but in almost less space, too. So,
That's true.
They might be easy to target for ridicule. I'm going to give them some sympathy today.
Yeah. I feel like they could make things a little bit snappier, but, they have a lot of bios to write, so.
That's a great point.
I would definitely take that job. I wonder if they're hiring. I'd watch a show and then write bios for it. That'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
Can you tell that I really need some extra money right now? I'm trying to find a gig.
Right. You're like, I would like that job. And I was thinking, I'd like any job.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a job technically, but I'm always on the market.
For our listeners, we're grad students. We get paid a pittance. And I feel like at any time, most of us have some sort of side thing we're attempting to do to make enough money to buy things. It's a rough life.
Yes, but it's also a good one because we get to podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
So we can go ahead with our Talking Fast segment to kick things off. I believe you are going first this week.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I say this every time, but there's a lot to say in 30 seconds.
Consider this your trial for the Netflix bio position.
Okay, pressure's on.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, Christopher's in town. There's a softball game, and Luke and Dean are playing each other. And then there's a Friday night dinner where everybody fights, basically. There's Straub and Francine, who are Christopher's parents, and they're really mean to Rory. Richard stands up for Lorelai, but then Lorelai and Richard have a fight, and then Lorelai and Christopher hook up, and very awkwardly in her old bedroom, Rory and Emily have a nice time, and then
Sorry.
I got so sidetracked. There's so much more to say.
I'll try to take off where you left, maybe.
Yeah. You ready? Okay, go.
Christopher is still here for a few days. He and Rory kind of go about the town and bond. He seems to be having money troubles despite saying his business is going really well. They also see a softball game. Then let's think, the Friday night dinner to end all dinners. It's horrible fighting all around. There's, the nice moment, like you mentioned, with Emily and Rory, back at home. Oh, yeah, and Lorelai forgot about her thing with Luke and the painting, which was tragic.
Oh, gosh.
I should have just tried to do the end stuff, but I was like, no, I'll do the beginning stuff, too.
Well, I had missed out a lot at the beginning anyways. There's just so much. This is going to be a dramatic episode for us as well, I think.
Yes, but I'm excited.
A lot of frustrating moments in this episode.
Seriously. Okay, well, let's slow down and get into it then.
So we start out with Rory's preparing the couch. And Lorelai is attempting to make it clear for her that she really shouldn't expect very much from Christopher. Apparently, we don't know that much about what's happened with Christopher in the past 16 years, but he seems to have this tendency to kind of promise big and then bring nothing in the end. Yeah. So that's what she's trying to get Rory to understand, which is really sad. It's really depressing.
Yeah. But meanwhile, Lorelai is so blunt and direct with Christopher. Also, once Rory leaves the room, she's like, why the hell are you here? And she does not, like, I think he says that she has zero faith in him, and she's basically like, yeah, I don't have faith in you, and I feel like she won't until he gives her reason to. And this episode, like, he doesn't give her enough to, like, have faith in him in the end. But I might be getting ahead of myself.
No, I agree. But in this moment, I have a very unconventional Lorelei's Closet nomination. Only because I couldn't find, I like was looking through my notes and hadn't noted any outfits, but I had noted the chaise lounge that they're sitting on, and I already had something for my Stars Hollow moment, so I thought that this worked because it is like a Lorelei's aesthetic thing.
Yeah.
But it's like an antique looking, well, not antique, but I don't know, older looking chaise, and it has like a striped brocade pattern that looks vaguely familiar to the couch my parents had when we were growing up. But it looks, it's probably not comfortable because it's a set piece, but it looks like it could be comfortable to like sit and read on.
Yeah.
And they're sitting on this when Lorelai is grilling Christopher and he's just kind of flopping over, giving nothing.
Yeah. I didn't really think of this as a pretty fashionable episode as well. I had to really look for my nomination. I think they were all just so stressed.
Yeah.
But the scene does conclude with Lorelai saying, like, of course, Christopher can always be part of Rory's life, and she's, like, left the door open, and he, like, needs to use it, basically. So I think, like, though we see Lorelai being very harsh and protective of Rory, she is still, like, I think the far more responsible and, like, reasonable co-parent in this situation. Like, I'm just really impressed with her, even though she's clearly, like, processing her emotions about all of this, as she'll tell Sookie later. Like, even in the midst of all of that, she's still, like, I don't know, I'm just really impressed, like, with the level of emotional maturity she's often at throughout the episode.
Yeah, she still realizes that, like, the main relationship to be worrying about here is Rory and her father's. And her relationship to him is kind of secondary.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's a hard thing for anybody to accept. But I think it's definitely true in this case. And yeah, she does a really good job with that. We also find that, well, Rory asks Christopher to come to her softball game the next day. Well, a
for
softball
her friend Dean.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which Christopher automatically knows that it's, you know, a dean.
She has a dean. It was actually pretty cute.
Yeah, that was. So that's where we go next. Pretty quickly, we go to the softball game. And I really front-loaded all of my different moments in this episode. But this episode has my Stars Hollow moment, which is Kirk commentating on the game, because it's Luke versus Dean. Well, they have teams, but those are the real players that we see. And apparently they've been like playing for, I don't know, 30 minutes or something so far, and nobody's scored any points. They're clearly not very good, but it's more just for fun and rivalry. So that was a good thing from this scene. I also, though, had my Friday night dinner nomination.
I did too.
The same scene, and for the exact same thing, which is Kirk and his homophobic comments.
Yes, that was my same critique as well. I thought, I was like, there's so much to critique later on in, like, all of the fights. I was like, let me put it in this smaller moment in the scene. But I guess we had similar thinking.
Yeah. Well, the rest of it actually happens at Friday night dinner. So.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But the thing that Kirk says is, and I hope I wrote this down right, he says, Luke, does your husband play too? Like, as a kind of call out for Luke playing badly. And this was, I mean, there are a couple different ways we could read it, I guess. It could be like a super misogynistic thing where he's calling Luke a woman for not being able to play well. Or I also took it as a super homophobic thing, like you're a, I don't know, a stereotypical gay man who can't play sports or something.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I was very disappointed in Kirk, who is a character who I would, in later seasons, I would say is like an ally in just his personality to queer people. And here he is being so misogynistic. It's disappointing.
I know, and I had the same experience watching this. Like his heckling started off so funny to me. Like he's saying like, well, you can't pitch and you can't hit. But then it took that turn in the end, and it had all so much bundled up into it. And it was so, I think the reason I nominated it too is that it's so casual and just latent homophobia too. Like it's just a quick little comment. You could miss it so easily if you just weren't paying attention to the episode. But I almost think that's what makes it like even more insidious, that it's just like in the logic of the show or Kirk's character, and almost like a thoughtless way, which is bad too. And I was trying to like unpack this. It seems to have that like, there's that connection of sports and masculinity, and like if you're good at sports you're like a man, or you throw like a girl if you're not, and it's that like femininity and homosexuality and like weakness on the other side of the binary. It's just all like really toxic and bad, and I did not enjoy it in the scene. It like really turned the moment of something funny of like Luke and Dean actually being bad at sports and Kirk providing fun commentary about that to like just a very like kind of like a violent logic that was swept under the rug quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I might have said this maybe last episode, but I kind of get the feeling that Kirk's actual character is still not solidified. I don't mean to say that Kirk in later seasons maybe wouldn't have made a job like this, because I don't really, like sometimes he does still say questionable things, but it just doesn't seem quite in line with Kirk later on, you know. And it was just a bad way to start off an episode that's already going to have a whole bunch of problematic things that come up.
Right. When I was nominating this scene, it made me think about your critique of the fat phobia in the last episode, and how I think these are like the side parts of the show that they're not aware of so much. Whereas like the Friday night dinner stuff we'll talk about later on, like the writers are clearly interested in those debates and those themes, and they're like exploring them, you know. But this stuff, they're just like putting it in there like they think it's funny, you know? And so that's why we are here to critique it, you know?
Yeah, to say times have changed. These things are mean.
Yeah. Okay. Moving forward, Dean and Christopher do meet after the game, or during the game, I guess. This game does not seem to have high stakes or high, like, strict rules.
Yeah, not at all.
They bond briefly over motorcycles, so...
Yeah. I think that's also a throwback to, I think episode 1, when Rory's just met Dean, so she's, like, thinking she doesn't want to go to Chilton, and Lorelai says something like, he better have a motorcycle. If you're going to give up this, he better have a motorcycle. And we hadn't heard him talking about motorcycles since, but obviously Christopher has one.
Well, Dean did say that he and Todd work on bikes together.
Oh, yeah,
so
true.
It's been like little. I guess they don't have enough money in the budget to actually show Dean on a motorcycle. They're saving up for Chris's.
I had envisioned that as like bicycle.
Maybe, honestly.
Sorry, Dean.
So this scene, I guess I front-loaded as well, because this scene also had my Lorelai's Closet nomination, and it's related to the motorcycle bit. I wanted to nominate Christopher's leather jacket.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I thought it was a very like visual cue of like, hey, look at this bad boy, you know, and he'll be the talk of the town shortly. I just think it's kind of funny. It feels like very wannabe bad boy to me. Chris secretly has the money background, or as Jackson will say, he's got the money nose. But on the outside, he wants to present himself as kind of like this outsider, maybe, or rebellious type. So the motorcycle, the jacket are all very part of, I think, this persona he wants to put on that he seems to be, he's been doing it since high school, it sounds like, but it just made me think, like, a lot of people had made Logan and Christopher comparisons, which I think are accurate, clearly. But, like, at this moment, visually, he almost reminds me more of Jess or Dean. But it's like he wants to look like Jess, I don't know if he is Jess.
Yeah, I agree. He'd be like if Dean tried to be like Jess. Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the later seasons, I see the connection between him and Logan, but yeah, here. And he definitely does have the wannabe look, because he's not disheveled in any way.
No.
He's spent, I guess, maybe like, he's probably 32 or something like Lorelai, so he spent the last probably 14 years or something doing God knows what, but obviously he hasn't been suffering that badly financially, so he's been probably getting money from his parents. So he's, it's all an act.
Yeah.
So after the softball game, they start like walking around Stars Hollow, and the first hint that we get that the news has spread is, well, the news is about to spread, is that Miss Patty shows up, and she starts flirting a little bit with Christopher with the weirdest logic. Like, she said, everybody here is kind of like a mother to Rory, so you're Rory's father, so that makes us a couple. And Christopher's just like, okay. But as they walk away, we see Miss Patty take out her little flip phone and start calling around.
Yeah. The sequence of gossip that starts with Miss Patty's flirting was my Stars Hollow moment. I just thought it was so perfect. Like, of course, the first time Rory's dad makes an appearance, it's going to be the talk of the town. But I like the way that it was, like, shot or shown to, like, unfold with Miss Patty pulling up the phone, and then you see Taylor with his phone. You see, like, just different scenes with Jackson and Andrew later on in the bookstore, then cut to, like, Jackson with a whole crowd around him, like, debating who he looks like, all of this different stuff. I just thought it was so hilarious and so quintessential Stars Hollow.
Yeah, and like the things that they're focusing on, like, yeah, Jackson giving his judgments about his money nose and that kind of stuff. Jackson was hilarious in this whole scene. I thought that it was really like comedic gold for him.
Yeah.
And he hasn't gotten that many opportunities to shine, so I thought this was great. I think I skipped a scene at the inn, actually, between the softball game and going around town. When we, like, go to the inn, and the first scene is just Suki and Michelle giggling. We don't know what they're giggling about. But the bad thing is that Lorelai points out that they're giggling and having a good time, which of course leads to them fighting. But then Lorelai and Suki have a good kind of friend talk about what's going on with Christopher.
Yeah, she's like, should I be mad? And she points out, like, every time she's about to be mad at him, he smiles, and then it's Christopher, as she says. Like, it's very poetic in a way, but really alluding to the strong ties that she has to him, and probably that, like, their relationship at that formative time.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, somehow the things that happen, especially in, like, high school, maybe a little bit in middle school, but they just, like, stick with you longer than anything that happens later than that, it seems. And of course, Christopher is probably Lorelai's, like, first love, so that adds to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Suki did a great job here of kind of, like, pulling out Lorelai's true feelings about things, and really getting her to, talk about it. Kind of in the same way that she did in the last episode with Lorelai's feelings about Luke. Again, she's here kind of like the therapist in a way where she can just kind of ask the right thing. And
always in the kitchen in that set at the inn. I've started to notice that it's like becoming quite repetitive in a kind of comforting way, but also it's like, let Sugi, like, can she have a scene elsewhere too?
Yeah, can we get more of her and Jackson or something? We haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the town and Christopher and Rory's kind of tour that she's providing for him. They stop by the bookstore, and Christopher wants to buy her a present, like a book. He says pick out any book you want, and he's saying he wants to like buy her something to remember the trip by, and that he has a lot to make up for, which is like kind of a red flag. We've noted before that Emily tries to do something similar. Money can't buy love, whatever, but it actually goes awry. He can't buy her love because his credit card is rejected, which is the first, sign that his like leather jacket and motorcycle are not the only part of his act. It's also like all the things he's saying are maybe not what they appear to be. We're starting to suspect here.
I almost chose this as my Rory's bookshelf, but something came up later. But the book that she wants to buy is the Oxford English Dictionary, and it's the I don't remember what it's called, like the condensed version or something.
Compact.
Compact. Because the actual, like if you actually were going to get the Oxford English Dictionary in physical form, it'd be multiple volumes. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to point out to our listeners, I'll put this link in our show notes. The Oxford English Dictionary is a great way to spend an evening. Just think of a word, look it up, and read all of the different ways that it's shown up in history and what its etymology is, and it's very interesting.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Get a glass of wine or tea and just, spend some quality time with the dictionary. And have you ever owned the OED in physical copy? Because I don't. No. I've only ever used like their database online stuff. But
yeah, same here.
It's the most reputable dictionary. Another tip, if you're ever going to cite a definition for a word in a paper, most likely it should be from the OED. Yep, that's free true. Tip from a writing teacher.
If you really want to have a fun time, don't look up a fun word like kerfuffle or something like that. You want to look up a word that sounds just mundane, that we say every day, and find out where it comes from. It'll have pretty interesting history.
Yeah. I actually did have my Rory's Bookshelf nomination in this scene, but it was not the dictionary either, actually. Oh, okay. Andrew and Jackson were discussing who Christopher looks like when Rory and Christopher enter, and they were saying they were debating between George Clooney and Brad Pitt. Mm-hmm. They also throw in someone named Billy Crudup. I'm not familiar with that actor, but
yeah, me neither.
George Clooney and Brad Pitt are iconic, and I imagine this was a very relevant pop culture reference at the time, but it still is today. They're still very handsome today as well. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to shed some light or attention to them. And I also just don't think Christopher looks like either of those two, though. So I'm like, what's in the water in Stars Hollow? Because I don't think they're seeing clearly. Like, sure, Christopher's a fairly attractive guy, I guess, but, like, he's no Clooney or Pitt.
No. He's got maybe, like, the hair color of Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Maybe, but definitely not George Clooney. He's just, like, a TV version of a handsome actor.
Yeah, which is fine.
Which is still a step above most normal people. So.
True. So then Lorelai, Christopher, Rory all meet up at Luke's after this. Oh, and one last thing worth mentioning, because it will be brought up again, is that after his credit card is declined, Christopher asks Rory not to tell Lorelai, which is yet another boundary red flag issue, which will be raised by Lorelai later on. So just wanted to mention that. But yeah, they all meet up at Luke's after this, and it's worth noting that Christopher ignores the no cell phone rule in Luke's, which like Lorelai has done before too, but it irked me for some reason when it was Christopher doing it. You know, like he's new to town. He should follow the clearly stated sign. Lorelai has worked up, you know, some like brownie points, right? Like
she's usually also like doing it kind of to piss Luke off, like in a flirty way, but she pointed at it and Christopher read it and then scoffed and answered the phone. Yeah, I agree. It was not good. Not good at all. But on the phone is Emily. It kind of makes me wonder, like, does Emily call him often, or did she know he would be in town, or what? Like, what prompted the call? But the funniest thing is, he mentions that he's with Lorelai and Rory, so he hands the phone to Lorelai, and Emily first of all says, "Christopher's in town," as if she's not talking to Lorelai on Christopher's phone, and it was cute. And then they set up plans for Friday night dinner. Ugh.
Right, with notably with Straub and Francine Hayden. So Christopher's parents will also be attending. And what rich-sounding names do they have? Straub and Francine. I mean, Francine is pretty normal, but wow.
Straub. I don't even really know how to spell it. I just took a guess.
I had the captions on, so I cheated. But Straub.
Yeah,
but sounds like strobe light rich. Is how it's pronounced, I think.
I was just thinking of stroganoff.
That's another good one.
So we don't really get any like in-between moments or anything from this to when we actually go to Friday night dinner. And this kind of indicates that Friday night dinner is going to be the main event of the episode, since we're only like 10 minutes in at this point.
I know. I feel like we need to take like a deep breath before we go to recap it, because it's going to be like a marathon, not a sprint.
I hope I can remember what point each person had, because there were so many weird points.
We interrupt this podcast with a message from our sponsor.
Do you have some lofty reading goals for 2022? Maybe you want to read all of the Goosebumps books ever written, or maybe you want to read through the etymology of every word in the English language. Whatever your goals might be, Stars Hollow Books has the tome of your dreams.
Just stop by our quaint, disorganized store and sort through the inappropriately labeled classic section if you're looking for a computer manual, or ask at the counter for that one copy of the Oxford English Dictionary that has been on hold for 20 years. We are happy here to help you get lost in a book and in our inventory choices.
For listeners of Talking Fast podcast, we have a special offer. We recently accidentally ordered 10 copies of every book on our request list due to an employee error. Side note, Kirk needs a new job again. So if you mention Talking Fast at checkout, you can get a second copy of whatever book you are buying for 50% off. That means not one copy of the Clone Wars Wild Space, but 2. Who would have expected that? Note, this offer does not apply to the Oxford English Dictionary, of which we only have one. It's really messing with our profit margins.
So remember, just mention Talking Fast podcast at the counter of Stars Hollow Books to get a second copy of your book of choice for 50% off. Who doesn't like a deal like that?
The first thing I noticed as they were coming up is Lorelai uses the key to enter, which I'd almost written down, like, wondering if we should point it out because it wouldn't be brought up, but then it was brought up right away. And it was just kind of like a setting the mood of the normal, like, Emily criticizing Lorelai that would be continuing for the rest of the night, kind of. We see clearly that Richard is obsessed with Christopher.
I know. Everyone, like Emily, Richard, they're like fawning over Christopher, and they say he has like a splash of greatness, and that they like hope that Rory will get her father's business sense. And I'm just thinking, what about Lorelai's? Like, she
Yeah.
was the one who rose in the ranks from like maid to manager. She's the one who's currently attending business school successfully.
Mm-hmm.
They can't know it, but someday she's going to open her own inn. Whereas, like, Christopher is currently failing, and they
Yeah.
don't know that. But, like, that was so frustrating. And it's only the tip of the iceberg of what is to come.
Yeah.
Because at this point, Straub and Francine arrive. So Emily and Richard go to, like, answer the door. Meanwhile, Lorelai and Rory are talking about, like, how should Rory even address them? Because this is technically a set of her grandparents that she hasn't seen, I guess, since she was a baby. Understandably, really emotionally hard for her to, like, what to expect and whatnot. And she ends up, when she goes to greet them, she ends up curtsying to them.
Yeah. So cute.
Which was so funny. And Lorelai kind of, like, laughs at her, and she's like, shut up. But I felt for Rory in this and many other moments after.
I know. I felt like her kind of emotional turmoil in this whole meeting was eclipsed entirely by Lorelai and Christopher. I think that it was probably much more important than Lorelai and Christopher's grown-up problems. I mean, meeting your grandparents as a teenager for the first time, and then them being as mean to her as they were, like, that's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And, like, we barely get any comforting of Rory or anything like that. It's very sad.
I completely agree. And so we do, so through this, like, conversation where they are kind of trying to get to know Rory, like, barely, they're basically just waiting for a moment to attack Lorelai, it seems like. And this is mostly Straub. Like, Francine doesn't seem to be talking too much, but Rory is, like, shy and not really responding too well, even though Richard is, like, bragging about how smart she is and whatnot, but she's understandably, like, really caught off guard. She's, like, she misses a chance to, like, basically show off her intelligence, I guess. Like, she's not a show pony. Like, she can't be smart on command necessarily. And Straub says that 16 is a dangerous age for girls, which is such a gross comment to, like, sexualize young girls like that. And then to ignore, like, I mean, this is something he'll do throughout the entirety of this conversation, but he's implying, like, Lorelai was dangerous at that age, totally ignoring Christopher's role at all. Like, why is it dangerous to be a girl at 16? What about, like, guys? Or,
where's the danger coming from?
Yeah, maybe. Exactly. And that's to, like, kind of generalize the heterosexuality of it all, of course, but, like, that's definitely the logic that he's thinking in here too.
I thought he was also, like, very dehumanizing towards Rory.
Yes.
Like, constantly kind of talking about her as the result of the stuff that had happened, like a problem that came up from that, and not as, like, a human being that was sitting right in front of them.
Yeah.
Like, nervous about meeting her grandparents for the first time, and then she has to hear about herself, like, just as a problem, like, not even as a human, just as a problem. It was, I would have punched Straub if I was there.
I know. It was really heartbreaking, and it was probably so difficult to be Rory hearing that. Oh, so true. And Lorelai tries to kind of disrupt this conversation because she is sensing how painful this is for Rory. And so she just blurts out, I hate President Bush, which I think, like, I liked that she did that because she's clearly just trying to deflect the attention from Rory completely. And I liked it. She's clearly trying to antagonize, like, Straub and Richard and specifically. And I mean, I do think it sets off Straub to, like, say all the stuff he's going to say. But I think he was going to say it anyways. So I just like that she was, like, trying to protect Rory in this moment and being like, okay, bring the fire on me with this, like, ridiculous comment.
It also, like, just really took me back to my grandparents are super conservative. And I remember, like, my parents are both pretty liberal. My mom was way more liberal at the time that George Bush was in office. Maybe she's still that liberal, but my dad isn't quite as liberal. But I remember there being so many weird conversations about Bush as a president. And, like, this, I guess this had come out probably just, like, right after 9/11 and all of that. And so it was definitely a very, like, fraught issue. But I thought it was kind of funny, and it seemed like something that a lot of viewers could probably relate to, just like and I think it's still true about our presidents, but just the kind of, like, polarizing effect of saying something like that.
Yeah, at a dinner party.
Yeah, it's not going to be just, like, a polite political conversation. It's going to be something much more if you say something like that. So yeah, I agree. Lorelai, she maybe could have picked something slightly better, but you're probably right. Straub was going to say that stuff anyways.
Yeah.
So why not go for the jugular, I guess?
Yeah. So we can unpack some of the stuff he says, which is not a fun job, really, but let's see. I mean, where to even begin? He basically opens with, like, asking her, are you happy how your life has gone, basically? And she at one point says that she manages an inn, and he responds, like, oh, you speak with such a haughty tone when you announce to the world you work at a hotel. Like, he's such an asshole.
Yeah.
And he is, like, blaming her. He says she seduced Christopher and ruined Christopher's life and all of this stuff, and it's so misguided, dude. Like, totally not placing any blame on Christopher at all. Totally not recognizing the value of, like, what she is doing and how good her life actually is. Like, so much to say.
Yeah, his comment about her job made me really fearful and sorry for any service workers he comes in contact with, because he clearly doesn't understand, like, the work that they're actually putting in. And it's he definitely was very snobby about Lorelai's job. And Richard and Emily, they, like, sometimes make, at the very beginning, they kind of made cracks about Lorelai's job, but it seems by this point in time that they, like, actually find her job to be something fairly respectable. I'm sure they would have preferred something different, but the fact that Straub only sees it as working at a hotel, and also that that's something so degrading, like, to not even treat Lorelai as a human.
I know, he's talking to her like she's, like, a second-rate person, you know? Like, she's literally beneath him in her status in the world. And it's so gross.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm lacking the, like, critical vocabulary
I know.
to dissect this, but it ultimately does boil down to just it's so wrong.
Yeah. He, like, goes on about how Christopher would have gone to Princeton and everything, like, generations of Haydens before.
Yeah.
And I was kind of annoyed that Christopher here, like, is not doing anything. Like, he's not really, you know, adding his own comments about, like, no, I probably wouldn't have gone to Princeton. Any of that. And he clearly also hasn't talked to his parents about this for 16 years, which is just another red flag for Christopher, I think. He hasn't done any work to make sure that they understood a little bit more about the situation.
And at this point, I think is when Richard stands up for Lorelai, right? And so I love what Richard has to say to Straub at this point. He says, "You recant that," which I thought was an epic phrase. And he kind of, like, grabs him and gets in his face. And I was like, okay, I'm glad that someone is finally defending Lorelai, because it should have been, like, Emily, Richard, Christopher. Any of them should have done it much sooner in this scene. And he says, like, my daughter is successful at what she does. I'm kicking you out. I thought that was like well handled, that he was like, you have to go. You know, he wasn't like, I'll give you a chance to apologize, or let's finally just be civil and go to dinner. But he was like, no, you're out. I would have nominated this for my gazebo moment if it were not for the conversation that Richard and Lorelai have later, because I think the intentions behind his defense of Lorelai are not as genuine as I would like them to be. But in the moment, I thought it was effective and dramatic, and I am so glad that someone told Straub off. And I don't even know what Francine thinks about all of this. It was very classic, like, waspy kind of wife, like, silently sitting by his side. That's also bad. Like, that would never have been Lorelai and Christopher, that's for sure, if that's what they wanted for their kids.
I also feel like that would never be Richard and Emily.
Yeah.
I do think Emily should have been more vocal in this moment, but she would never have let Richard, or maybe it would have been reversed and she would have been the one like insulting somebody. But either way, it seems like their relationship is a bit different. Francine pretty much just sits there and looks aghast but says nothing. So she's really not helpful, or she's not helpful, and in that way she's harmful in the moment. But yeah, it was a terrible fight, and I'm glad Richard kicked them both out, and we didn't have to suffer through a dinner of that.
Seriously. So everyone kind of parts ways at this point. It seems like Rory's already been sent out of the room at this point, which is good, so she didn't overhear everything. But basically, after the scene, Lorelai goes to the study to see her dad to say, like, thank you for defending her, and that she knows it was hard. So this scene actually is one that I had in my memory for a while. When Lorelai and Richard had their moment in the hospital, and that episode, I was thinking, like, I know they have a rocky relationship, and I feel like they have a fight early on, but I couldn't remember when. But this is definitely what I was remembering, and it is as bad as I remember it, because what Richard says in the scene, like, cuts so deep. Like, I cannot believe he says some of this stuff to Lorelai, and she just has to, like, still go there every week and, like, mend, and eventually kind of like mend the relationship. I don't know. Like, it's such hurtful things. I'd be like so traumatized.
Yeah. It's hard to tell, like, whether he is just saying this because of the heat of the moment, or if it's really his true feelings coming out.
Yeah, he definitely lashes out at her.
One of the things his basic sentiment of, like, when she says thanks for standing up to me, pretty much he's saying, like, I wasn't standing up for you. I was standing up for the family and our reputation. I said those things to mend our reputation, even though I didn't necessarily think that, like, that's not how I actually see you. I just did it for the sake of the family. That's almost worse than, like, if he hadn't said anything at all, in a way, because it's basically just saying, like, I did this for me and Emily. You were just a way to do it.
Right, and she'd been, like, feeling good that he defended her, right? So then to only be taken down, to be like, no, that wasn't for you, is almost like it takes her down to a level even lower than where she was when it was Straub attacking her, because now it's like Richard as well, and he ends up like almost saying the same lines as Straub here. Like, he says that there was a proper procedure to be followed, and that Christopher was willing to follow that procedure and she wasn't, and she was supposed to sacrifice what she wanted, basically, to do what was right. And I think the clear thing to point out in commenting on this is, like, he thinks there's only one thing that is right, you know? Like, he thinks the whole get married, whatever, is the right choice. And clearly there's always going to be multiple right options in a scenario. And he thinks Lorelai chose the wrong thing, which is to, like, go out on your own and do what you want to do. I don't know. It's painful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Like, as you usually think of your parents as like what they want for you is for you to live a happy life. And here Richard is kind of saying like, I didn't want you to live a happy life. I wanted you to live a life that would protect our family's reputation.
Yeah.
And as Lorelai says, like, I just feel so bad for him that that's what he thinks. Yeah, that people should be doing for life. It's really sad.
Yeah. Something in the middle that I thought was interesting is like he kind of goes back to the moment when she ran away, and he's talking about like you can't imagine like what I had to tell my friends and colleagues, and your mom like didn't get out of bed for a month. And I feel like those are two different things. Like I was suddenly picturing like, was Emily's hurt like actually like a genuine like, my daughter has left me, have I failed her, did I pressure her too much, like fear for her, not knowing where she is, feeling sad, versus like feeling, I'm sure it was hard, sure, to tell people in your life, but like that's kind of nothing compared to what Lorelai's going through. So I was interested in that snapshot of like, I do wonder what it was like for Emily and Richard to kind of like grieve the loss of their daughter, not death, but like departing from their lives, while also dealing with the culpability of their actions in that as well. And maybe they didn't deal with it, and they didn't deal with the hurt they felt either. So it's like, oh, you are all so messed up from all of this stuff, you know?
Yeah, I really like that point. It really makes me think that, like, if we look back at most of the fights Emily and Lorelai have had, they were mostly about her leaving and Emily kind of being abandoned in a way. Whereas, yeah, we're seeing that for Richard, it is really about his reputation. So, yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at the difference in their relationships, or the relationship she has with her parents. I wonder if that holds true as we go on.
I know, because we often think of Emily as the really public facing person in their relationship, caring about appearances, but we see in this moment Richard has like deep set values about that as well, like family reputation, family status, and like it runs deep, really. And Lorelai does end this conversation by saying she feels so sad for him, which I think is Lorelai recognizing, like, yeah, how sad it is that as my dad, you want me to have what kind of life you thought was right, not what would make me happy, you know? Yeah. And she's like, that is so sad that that's how you feel. And that's such like a complex comment for her to make at that point. I thought it was a good line.
I feel like in a way it's really showing her like maturity and reckoning with the whole situation. Like,
yeah,
she knows that she's living a happy life, and yeah, she's realized, like, she's not feeling, I mean, she is feeling hurt and angry at her father and everything, but she's also like realizing what he could possibly be missing in his life, and just like the sadness of what could have been for him as well as what could have been for her.
So I don't totally blame her for not going to comfort Rory immediately after having this conversation with her dad. But the next scene is between Emily and Rory, and this is actually my gazebo moment.
Oh, mine too.
Oh my gosh, we have so much in common today. Because this is basically like Emily comforting Rory. And I think she basically says and does all of the right things in this scene by the end of it. So she starts talking to Rory, like saying, well, you know, like a lot of shit went down in there. not in those words, but she starts then to say basically like, you know, Straub is actually a pretty good guy. Like, he's a good lawyer. He does a lot of charity. But then she like pauses and she's like, let's face it, he's a big ass. And she just totally sets aside all of her commitments to like her appearances to society and really like totally embraces this familial connection she has with Rory. And is like, forget all of that. Like, Rory, he was so like he was such an ass to you, to everyone here. And she says, I think just the sweetest thing you could possibly say to Rory in this moment, which is like, there's been a lot of talk about disappointments tonight and in the past, but I want to make something very clear. You, your person, and your existence have never been included in that list. And like, just saying, you know, as an like, it was an unplanned surprise pregnancy for a teen, but like, Rory, you have never been a disappointment. And I just thought it was a wonderful pep talk. And she gets her to eat leftovers after that, so she's clearly cheered her up in that way too.
Yeah, I definitely cried a little bit. I'm even tearing up now just thinking about it.
I know.
But I think like that is such a problem with how we talk. Like, I think just the English vocabulary we have available to us to talk about like unplanned pregnancies and stuff like that, that there's always kind of the implication through the words we have that the actual baby itself is unwanted or a disappointment. And yeah, I'm really glad that Emily took the moment here to just be like, no, that's not the case. Rory is valued and she is like loved in this family. And yeah, I loved that moment. Especially after like the explosions we'd just been watching.
I know. I myself, I'm like a whoopsie baby, you know. I feel like I can relate to Rory and Lorelai on that level, though she did get married when I was like 3 or 4, so I didn't have like that like lifelong thing that Rory and Lorelai do, but it's like stuff like this you do need to hear throughout your childhood growing up, you know, because you do start to like doubt or worry, especially if one parent has like left or isn't engaging. So you need to be like reminded like, oh, if you do need pep talks like this and like careful use of language like you're pointing out to kind of really build you up. So I thought Emily did really well here.
Yeah, especially since we like pointed out earlier that this was a hard night for Rory, even if things had gone well. Like, even if Straub and Francine had been civil, it would have been a hard night for her because she was meeting her grandparents for the first time. So yeah, that on top of everything, I'm really glad this happened. The next scene is Lorelai up on her childhood balcony, crying and thinking about what just happened. Christopher comes up and they start to reminisce about things that have happened on this balcony, including stargazing, looking at naked people through telescopes, and possibly the conception of Rory herself.
Yep. One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah. And it leads, I'm always kind of astounded at the things that can lead to people hooking up, especially on shows, but that's what happens here.
Which is just tragically cut into another scene of Luke showing up at the diner, and we're led to believe, which is like we're shown that Lorelai has completely forgotten that she agreed to paint at Luke's that night. And I think the choice of like showing them start to hook up, then showing Luke looking forlorn, and then showing them hook up some more is exactly why people don't like Christopher.
Yeah.
Because
so
like
true.
In and of itself, this is like a questionable decision on their part, you know, but you might understand how they got to that place. They've both been like brought to an emotional low. They're reminded of where they were at when they were 16. So they hook up, you know, they kind of like go back to that place together. But to like connect it in the viewer's mind with like Lorelai's not going to be with Luke because of Christopher, I totally understand why the fandom is so anti-Christopher. And I felt it. I was so agonized. I just wanted to close my eyes, you know. I'm like, I don't care that they're hooking up really, but I'm like, for Luke, poor Luke.
I know. He'd done everything. He'd put like tarps over all the tables, moved everything away. And we had just gotten the realization in the last episode that Lorelai might have feelings for him. And I mean, it's just teasing us, just like they're not going to get together. And now Lorelai's going to have to explain why she missed it. It was
Mm-hmm. I'm a sucker for like this secondhand sadness. Not like secondhand embarrassment is definitely a thing, but it's almost like secondhand sadness. And I can't think of any other examples, but it was the feeling of where you like see Luke going. And it's almost like dramatic irony. Like Lorelai doesn't know that she stood him up, but we do. And I like take on that sadness and the pain, and you know, like she's gonna have to go apologize. And I feel like that's like another trope of like the scene to scene in other shows, but I can't think of an example. But that's like that was the affect I was experiencing watching that. Of like, I know Lorelai doesn't know yet, but oh, it's gonna be bad.
Yeah. I feel like that often happens in movies when like one partner is cheating on somebody, and they like pan in on the people hooking up and then go in to like the other partner like making dinner or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like that. Yeah. Maybe that's like Mad Men. That probably happened all the time in that show.
Oh, that's such a good show. But
yeah.
God, there'd be so many Friday night dinners to talk about in that show.
Yes, but at least it's almost like they made the show to be a Friday night dinner critique.
Yeah, that's true. It's very conscious.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, we could go on about that.
Of course.
But pretty much this is the end of the Friday night dinner. We get kind of the aftermath of Lorelai and Christopher hooking up, and then Lorelai kind of freaking out about it a little bit. But then we have an awkward drive home, where it looked to me like Rory was behind a plexiglass shield in the car. I don't know if that was just the windshield or something, but anyways. So then they just go home, and then there's like some awkward like good night kind of stuff between Christopher and Lorelai and Rory. We get a little bit of Lorelai comforting Rory, like kind of just making sure that Rory knows that all of the stuff that was said was directed at Lorelai and not her. I thought that it was good that it happened, and I feel like Emily's talk kind of did the most work of all of this, but I kind of felt like there could have been a little bit more said, but maybe it would have been better said like the next day when everybody'd had some time to emotionally chill out. I don't know.
I did like the moment where Rory says like they don't even want to know me, which is like I mentioned just like a minute ago, it can feel that way. You're like, certain people have made the choice to like not get to know me, and you're like, why would they ever do that to me? Like, what have I done? But Lorelai is like, it's not about you, like as like hard as that sounds, but she's saying like they're full of anger and pride, and it's standing in the way of them realizing how much they want to know you. And so I did think that was a really good piece of advice. And she reiterates again that she's like, your dad and I have no regrets, which I think is good to like just repeat constantly to Rory.
In classic Lorelai, she makes it into a joke. Like, she says they have no regrets, and then talks about possible regrets they might have, including a weird tattoo that Christopher might have. But as usual, it kind of diffuses the moment.
Yeah.
And everybody, well, I'm sure none of them were comforted after all of this, but as much comforting as could have been done was done.
So, cut to the next day. Lorelai, like, bolts out of bed from sleep. She realizes, like, she's forgotten about the Luke thing. So she runs to Luke's in her pajamas. And they have such a sad conversation where, like, Luke's trying to play it cool, but he's clearly hurt, you know? And it's like, what can she say in this moment? Of course you can apologize, but she's already she's already done the action that hurt him, you know? Like, no matter what she does or says, she can't take back that she, like, stood him up. And, oh, that's so painful.
Yeah, part of me at this scene was like, just tell him what happened. Maybe he'd understand, because it was crazy. But you're right. Like, he's already gone through this whole night being hurt. It's not going to help him that much to know what happened, especially if she were to say that she and Christopher hooked up.
Yeah.
That would have heartbroken him. Yeah, I think that it was a very sad scene, but...
And to, like, kind of get ahead of us, like, The ending of the episode is Lorelai surprising Luke by like painting the whole diner, which I did think was a thoughtful move on her part, because, you know, a good part of an apology is like actually doing something for someone or changing your actions, right? So if she can't take back that she wasn't there to paint, like, it was nice that she painted it. But I think that totally like overlooks like it was a bonding thing for them. It was gonna be like a date. It was gonna be a moment. Like, he was clearly not upset about the painting, you know?
Yeah. He didn't even want to paint in the first place.
So I think the whole like she painted it for him, and they kind of start to have banter again by the end. But I think we get the sense that they're like, to use a metaphor, maybe like painting over like the stuff underneath that is not totally mended between them. Like, it's probably going to take them a while to build back their trust in any potential romance down the line.
Yeah, that's true. And it would be complicated no matter what by the things that happens next.
Yes.
Which is when Lorelai gets back home, the first sign that something's wrong, like, she's really shook up about this, about standing Luke up, which I think, like, maybe we wouldn't necessarily understand, except for the fact that she says no to coffee when Christopher offers. So that means that something is seriously up. And then they kind of, like, rehash what happened the night before. But then Christopher decides to say they should get married. I really don't understand where this is coming from. So out of the blue.
I know. I think Christopher is like, and I think Lorelai says this to him and to Rory too, like, he wants, I think they both talk, like, at least Rory talks about how she sees a change in Christopher. And I think perhaps the change, and we don't know him before this, so it's hard to say, but what I suspect is that he has like a desire or to be different at this point in his life. Like, he wants to be responsible. He wants to be the father to Rory. He wants to be like a husband to Lorelai, but he's not ready for that, or he's not willing to put in the work to do all of that. And so, like, this whole proposal to Lorelai is so ambitious and lofty and, like, romantic, but it's not grounded in his reality, which is what Lorelai says. Like, she's like, you're not ready for, like, the day-to-day actually showing up every day to be married.
Yeah, you have to go through all the different steps to get there.
Yeah.
There was, in this scene, my Rory's bookshelf moment. So he says they can get married and then get to know each other. And Lorelai's response to this was, "That's very Fiddler on the Roof of you."
Yes.
And we've talked about our love of musicals before, but Fiddler on the Roof is my favorite musical of all time. I love it. And I haven't watched it for a couple years, so I should redo that. But I couldn't resist bringing this up as my Rory's bookshelf moment, just because it does have that trope. Well, it starts off with the idea, like, that of an arranged marriage where you get married and then you get to know each other. Maybe you fall in love, like Tevye and Goldie do, but...
Do you love me?
Yes. I love it. But oftentimes people don't. And of course, the three daughters all choose their own husbands, so they don't go in that route. So it's kind of like a whole musical kind of questioning what kind of marriages work, what kind of loves are, what kind of loves can, like, persist through time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give an answer, because in the end, many different kinds of loves do. But yeah, I just love that she brought this up as the comeback to Christopher with his absolutely ridiculous proposal.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's just echoing what Emily and Richard wanted, which was is almost like a proposed marriage of, like, get together since you got pregnant, you know, and, like, yeah, it's very arranged, and it fits with that musical. Also, the opening number about tradition, like, first of all, it's a great song, but also that's yet another theme totally appropriate for Gilmore Girls too, of, like, Emily and Richard on the side of tradition.
Yeah, and by the end, in some ways, the traditionalists kind of come to understand that different ways of living can work. But yeah, that was finally, it was a big fight between that and the OED. But
and that won out.
Yeah.
I like that. That fit very thematically. It's very good.
Yeah. So pretty much this scene ends with Lorelai refusing this marriage. Obviously, it's not going to happen. There's no way that she would accept. But we do get her emphasizing that he should still be a part of Rory's life. And she still wants him to come around and at least call at the very least. I don't really know how often he was doing that. So it kind of puts their relationship a bit back where it had been, maybe with like one step forward.
This is semi-related. I was thinking in the scene with Christopher, and like throughout the whole episode, I had mentioned last time that I watched all of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and so I started to listen to the Gilmore guys. They cover Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. They call themselves the Maisel Goys, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
Because they're not Gilmore guys anymore. It's Kevin and Alice, I think, are the host names. But anyways, so I was listening to them, and recently they talked about the trope of the useless man and Amy Sherman Palladino's work. And they were talking about Joel, Midge's husband, who has like big insecurities about himself and feeling inferior compared to his wife and all of this stuff. But anyways, I thought like Christopher is kind of like the OG useless man
So
in
true.
like in the Palladino's work. And it's really, I think it's curious to like observe his trajectory into becoming less useless, because Joel throughout that show becomes less useless, and it's almost like a journey they have to go on to like reckon with, like, I don't know, but it's kind of, I was just thinking of Christopher as like, I don't know, you don't always see in shows men just clearly being so useless in a way that feels so relatable, of like, we should just come to terms with the fact that so many guys are mediocre and for so long culture has treated them as like great, but like the bar is low for a lot of them when they feel like they're reaching a higher standard. And I think we just need to even the platform for people in terms of being recognized for their use value. No, I mean, that sounded very capitalistic of me to treat people as if they're all about their use value.
But I think Lorelai kind of gives that same sentiment when she's explaining to Rory why she refused Christopher. She's like, Lorelai has her own set of needs that need to be met in a relationship as well, and Christopher just wasn't equipped to handle them at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a great sentiment for women just to think about in general. I feel like so often women kind of settle or like kind of take what's given to them, but without thinking about, their personal needs that that they would like a partner to meet, and like use that as a way to search for a partner rather than some other ways. But yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And you see, Lorelai has so many people in her life who do meet her needs, like Sookie is a great example, to also recognize you can find these people not only in romantic relationships, like if you want that, great, continue to search for it, but like there's so many other ties and support systems you can have. And I feel like Lorelai is really enabled and confident in like her refusal of Christopher, because she does have like everyone in Stars Hollow. She has Sookie, like she knows she's set still even without him, which is really nice message, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking of Paris and Rory and how they become that later in later seasons, but we'll get to that. At this point, they still kind of hate each other.
Yeah. I did feel in this like final scene, I was feeling for Rory as like the young, she's just like, well, why wouldn't you marry him, And she's like, in this last scene, she's still definitely very like optimistic about Christopher. She's still holding out to believe that something has changed. And Lorelai ends up saying like, we can not put away all the blankets, like let's leave the door open to the possibility that he's changed. But Lorelai is still really holding strongly on like, I know him so well. Like, you have to trust me that he's not ready. And I do think Rory does kind of trust her, but she still is holding out a bit of hope that I don't think Lorelai is, but Lorelai is willing to like kind of meet her there for her sake.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like my parents are still married, so I don't have this perspective from a child of divorce or something like that, but there are so many movies and TV shows about kids, like their ultimate dream for their parents is to get back together. Yeah. And I feel like that's what Rory, like, she just has this vision of the family together, even though it's not realistic, and like maybe the Christopher in her visions isn't the same as an actual Christopher. Yeah. But it's still like kind of an ultimate dream for her, which makes sense. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right. You might think the next episode is going to be her like trying to parent trap them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's an exact example of like what you're talking about.
Thankfully not.
Okay. I think that brings us to the end then.
Yeah. What an emotional episode.
I know. I have a feeling, I haven't looked ahead, but I have a feeling the next episode is going to be very lighthearted, like town shenanigans or something. Yeah, and I could be completely wrong, but these have been like some heavy episodes, and I feel like they're going to lighten it out, but we'll see.
Yeah, maybe give us just some like straight romance episodes or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in that case, please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple iTunes or wherever you listen to us. And you can email us with any of your thoughts at talkingfastpodcast@gmail.com. We're also collecting gazebo moments on our Instagram, so you can go to @talkingfastpodcast and comment on any of our gazebo moment posts, and we'll be collecting them for a later episode.
Yes, at the end of season 1, we're going to have a lot of like listener input about what were your highlights throughout all of season 1, and we'll share our own, and it's going to be a really fun way to wrap up this first season. We're almost there, so like close. Already in episode 15.
I know, it's crazy.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Until
talk to you next week.